Hello everyone, my name is Astha. I welcome you all to our classes for IEO for class 7th. This is our 11th class wherein we will be doing the topic of adverbs. We will be understanding the various categories of adverbs. When do we have to use which category, and we will be doing this through examples and questions as well. Alright, so let's get started.
The first question that comes to our mind is what exactly are adverbs? किसी भी टॉपिक को करने से पहले उसका मीनिंग समझ लेना बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट है। और जैसे कि हम करते आए हैं, हम इसके थोड़े से एग्जाम्पल्स लेंगे और उन एग्जाम्पल्स में से ही हम इसका मीनिंग डिराइव करेंगे। ऑलराइट, एग्जाम्पल्स हम इसलिए लेते हैं ताकि एग्जाम्पल्स से आसानी से समझ आ पाए। आपको याद, अगर मैं आपको सिर्फ मीनिंग बता दूंगी तो आपको मीनिंग तो याद करना नहीं है, क्योंकि है उसमें ये तो नहीं आएगा ना कि व्हाट आर एडवर्ब्स। उसमें ये आएगा कि जैसे चूज द एडवर्ब, या फिर इसमें से आप करेक्ट एडवर्ब ऑप्शंस में से चूज करिए। तो एडवर्ब्स के प्रैक्टिकल क्वेश्चंस आएंगे। ये तो नहीं पूछेगा आपसे कोई कि क्या है होते हैं एडवर्ब्स, बट आपको आपको उसके क्वेश्चंस का आंसर देने के लिए आपको पता होना चाहिए कि एडवर्ब्स होते क्या हैं। तो इसीलिए हम ये भी समझेंगे कि एडवर्ब्स क्या होते हैं, बट थ्रू आवर एग्जाम्पल्स। सो लेट्स स्टार्ट। Now you see, there's a sentence over here. इस सेंटेंस को हम पढ़ें तो इट सेज शी लुक्ड एट हर गिफ्ट हैप्पीली। अपने गिफ्ट को कैसे देख रही थी? द गर्ल गॉट अ गिफ्ट एंड शी वाज लुकिंग एट अ गिफ्ट हैप्पीली। हाउ वाज शी लुकिंग एट द गिफ्ट? हैप्पीली। शी वाज हैप्पी टू सी द गिफ्ट। हाउ डिड शी फील? शी वाज हैप्पी एंड शी वाज लुकिंग एट द गिफ्ट हैप्पीली। ऑलराइट, रिमेंबर दिस। She looked at a gift happily. कैसे देख रही थी? How? We are answering the question how here. Okay? Here. Her father rarely surprised her like this. In this sentence, which question is being answered? How often? Means how often did her father surprise her like this? Rarely. So what is the answer here? Rarely. What was the question? How often? The question being answered in the form of rarely, saying rarely her father surprised her like this. And the question is, here the sentence is, there were balloons everywhere. Okay, so which question is this sentence answering now? Where? Where were the balloons? Balloons were everywhere. So the first one answered how, the second one answered how often, the third one is answering where. Now next, this sentence is, her father got her a gift today. So this sentence is answering the question when. You see, her father got her a gift today. When did he get her a gift? Today. The question being answered is today. The fourth point is when, and her father got her a gift today. There are different kinds of questions being answered in each sentence. Now here you see, she was completely surprised by the gift. Here the question being answered is the fifth question, which is to what extent. मतलब वो किस लिमिट तक, किस हद तक सरप्राइज थी? She was completely, वो एकदम सबसे ज्यादा, she was completely surprised by the gift. Alright, so completely. To what extent? Completely. Okay. Now, from all this, let's understand what adverbs are. Adverbs जो होते हैं, they describe a verb, adjective or another adverb and answer these 5 questions. The questions जिनके हमने examples लिए थे, how often, to what extent, when and where. So these questions are answered by the words called adverbs. And what do they describe? They describe any verb or adjective or another adverb. इसको हम better understand करेंगे next slide पे. तो अब हम सारे examples लेंगे और समझेंगे तो आपको better समझ आएगा. The first sentence was, she looked at her gift happily. Then the next one said, her father rarely surprised her like this. Third one was, there were balloons everywhere. Then, her father got her a gift today. The last one said she was completely surprised by the gift. Now, you see the first question. The first sentence is answering the question how. And आप identify करो कि इसमें से कौन सा word है जो ये question answer कर रहा है. Happily. So what is the adverb here? Happily. Adverb की हमने definition क्या पढ़ी है? Adverbs are the words which describe a verb, adjective, another adverb and answer any of these questions. How, to what extent, etc. So इसमें कौन सा word answer कर रहा है ये question? Happily. And happily क्या describe कर रहा है? Happily is describing the girl because she was looking at the gift happily. Okay? Now next, the second sentence, her father rarely surprised her like this. Here, the question being answered is how often. How often is being answered by which word? Rarely. Okay. So it is the adverb. Because adverbs we know that they answer any of these following questions of how often, when, where, etc. Okay. The third question is where. So in the third sentence, where का जवाब कौन सा word दे रहा है? Everywhere. Where were the balloons? The balloons were everywhere. Okay, so the adverb here is everywhere. The next question being answered is of when. Now, when? Her father got her a gift today. When did her father get her a gift? Today. Alright. So the adverb here is today. Because adverbs क्या होते हैं? जो describe करते हैं किसी noun, adverb या adjective को और answer करते हैं questions. तो यहाँ पे आंसर किया है when ने. Alright. Now the last question being answered is to what extent. To what extent was the girl surprised? She was completely surprised. She was completely surprised by the gift. Okay. So these are the 5 adverbs. These are the 5 questions जो adverbs answer करते हैं. How का हमें मिला है happily से. How was the girl looking at the gift? Happily. How often did her father surprise her like this? He rarely surprised her like this. And where were the balloons? They were everywhere. When did the father get her a gift? Today. And to what extent was she surprised? She was completely surprised. Okay, so these are the 5 examples of adverbs. Now we will see each category of adverbs and understand through examples. Let's start. So the first type of adverbs that we are going to do are the ones that answer the questions of when. These are the adverbs which tell us about when. Okay, so we will see a few examples like after, already, before, early, now. These are the few examples. We will see them in sentences. Okay, in sentences. She will visit the hospital tomorrow. So, which question is being answered here? When? When will she visit the hospital? Tomorrow. And which word is answering the question? Tomorrow. So, tomorrow becomes the adverb. Next, the results were announced yesterday. Now, when is being answered by which word? Yesterday. So, adverb here is what? Yesterday. Okay, so the first category of questions being answered. These are the other adverbs which we can use while answering the questions of when. Now, next category. So the next category of adverbs are the ones which answer the questions of where. Let us see a few examples. The adverbs are away, everywhere, here, there, inside. These are only a few examples. Now the examples in sentences, they will meet you there. So the question, which word is answering the question of where? There. Where will they meet you? They will meet you there. Then, where do flowers bloom in spring? The second sentence. The adverb answering the question is everywhere. Alright? So, the second category is where. Now, next. The third category of adverbs are the ones which answer the questions of how something is done, how did that happen, etc. So the adverbs which answer the question of how could be easily, happily, loudly, quickly, quietly. All right. And now these is one of the sentence examples of this adverbs. How do we use them in sentences? He slipped away. How did he slip away? He quietly slipped away. So the word answering the question of how is quietly. So the adverb is quietly here. Another, how does she write? How does she work? She works fast. So the word which is answering the question of how is fast. Okay, this was the third category. Now, another category is the adverbs answering the questions of to what extent. To what extent मतलब किस limit तक, किस extent तक, किस हद तक, enough, extremely, quiet, too, very. These are a few adverbs which answer the questions of to what extent. Now if we use them in sentences, she almost finished the work. To what extent has she finished the work? She has almost finished the work. So which word is answering the question of to what extent? Almost. So almost becomes the adverb. Then they were completely surprised by the windfall. To what extent were they surprised by the windfall? Completely. So the word which answers the question of to what extent is completely. So this is the fourth category. Now next, this is the fifth category of adverbs, telling us how often does something happen. Frequency. You see here, okay, so now this is the chart that I have made for so that you can understand how often this for the how often adverbs chart. These are all adverbs, all of these. पर एक टाइमलाइन बना दी है, एक वो बना दी है कि जैसे अगर how often, if there is something that happens never, which means जो 0%, जो कभी भी नहीं होता, then that is never. Something that happens about 5% of the time, मतलब बहुत ही rare chances होने के, तो hardly ever. 10% मतलब seldom, थोड़ा बहुत हो जाता है, occasionally. Then अगर 50% times होता है, 50% times नहीं होता है, तो sometimes. फिर 50% से ज़्यादा बार होता है अगर, तो often, ये मतलब ज़्यादातर यही होता है. And normally 80% times जब से ही चीज होती है तो हम उसे normal situation कहते हैं कि normally this happens. And 90% जब most of the times मतलब कुछ हो रहा है तो usually. And if something happens 100% of the times, then that is always. Okay, so this is the adverbs chart. You can use, अब आप adverbs से आपको एक और advantage मिल गई. Now you know the different kind of adverbs so that you can use them. आप इनको अब use कर सकते हैं जब आपको बताना है कि कितने often कुछ चीज होती है. जैसे आपको पता है often कब use करना है and seldom कब use करना है, sometimes कब use करना है. Okay, so you should add this to your vocabulary. Now we will see the examples. I always wake up at 6 o'clock. Always wake up at 6 o'clock means I wake up at 6 o'clock 100% of the times. मतलब मैं रोज सुबह 6 o'clock उठती हूँ. Then I think there is a mistake here. This is this is A, but this should be an O. I'm sorry for the spelling error. Then I usually come home from work. Usually मतलब 90% of the time. Usually I come home from work. Maybe rare chances में like 5-10% of the times work के बाद कहीं और चले गए. But 90% of the time come home from work. I usually come home from work. So कौन सा words हैं जो answer कर रहे हैं questions of how often? Always and usually. So ये हैं हमारे adverbs. Okay. So now let's move on. This was the fifth category. We have done 5 categories. Now I have a few adverbs so that to make you understand कि कैसे sentences में use होते हैं. Okay. There's this adverb arrogantly, जिसका मतलब होता है cheekily, insolently, मतलब थोड़ा सा rude behavior में, थोड़ा proudy behavior में. Example क्या हुआ? He entered the class arrogantly. Okay, ये इसका example है. When we use it in a sentence, it can be used like this. जिसने बहुत cheekily class में enter किया. Nobody likes arrogant people though. We should not be arrogant. Okay. Now let's move on to the next one. So here the adverb is rapidly. Rapidly का मतलब होता है quickly, fast, swiftly, quickly, speedily. Rapidly कौन से question को answer कर रहा है? Think about it. It is answering the question of how. And the examples are, she glanced rapidly in the room. ने quickly room के अंदर देखा, जल्दी से देखा. In 2018, production in the factory fell rapidly. 2018 में जो फैक्ट्री की प्रोडक्शन थी वो बहुत जल्दी गिर गई. कैसे गिर गई? जल्दी. She glanced rapidly. How did she glance across the room? She glanced rapidly. So आप देख रहे हो. I hope you are able to identify the adverbs by now. Now we'll move on to the next one.
So for this one we have the adverb of certainly. Now certainly means definitely, strictly. When you are absolutely sure about something, you say certainly. It could be used in sentences like, you certainly make a good looking footballer. It will certainly rain today. Okay. Now, let's move on to the next example. We have the example of word often. Often means many times, frequently when something happens. We did this example in the adverbs. Which answer which question? Which answer the questions of how often, the frequency, how often something happens. Okay. So then the meaning we've done. Examples, she often reads a book. The verb, which word answers the question of how often? Often here. I often suffer from headaches. Okay. And the next example. So here the word is unexpectedly. The meaning is unaware, unbeknown. जब कुछ ऐसा होता है जो आपने सोचा नहीं होता है, जो अचानक से हो जाता है, we say this happened unexpectedly. How? It answers the question of how. So it is an adverb which answers the question of how. He left the school. How? Unexpectedly. The light came on. How? Unexpectedly. See? So both of them answer the question of how. Both of them are adverbs. Now, here we have the word specially. Specially means particularly, something which is in particular, exclusively. Let me give you an example. The government should take steps specially for global warming. Now this sentence means that the government needs to take steps for many things, but specially, मतलब special importance देनी है for global warming. Then another sentence, I especially like to go on vacation in summer. मतलब मेरे को वेकेशन पे जाना तो पसंद है, पर particularly, पर exclusively summer में तो बहुत ही पसंद है. तो especially like to go on vacation in summer. Right? So ये another adverb, exclusively. So this is another adverb which is officially. This answers the question of again how, and it means formally, on the record. Example sentences are, the world war was officially over. मतलब जब पेपर पे जब फॉर्मली दोनों सारी कंट्रीज ने मिलके बोल दिया कि हाँ अब फॉर्मली खत्म हो गई, अब हमने ट्रीटी साइन कर दी है, अब ऑफिशियली ओवर है. देन
The winner will be officially announced tomorrow. Officially मतलब जब properly through authorities जब result आएगा, then the winner will be announced. Okay, so the question of how officially answers the question of how in these sentences. Next. Alright, so for the quiz, what we will be doing is, now every question you will be given 1 minute. 1 minute means 60 seconds. Why am I giving you 1 minute? Because you see, your question paper of IEO, it has about 50 questions, and so you can imagine that you get more or less a minute to answer the questions. Now this 1 minute is the maximum that you should be taking for answering the question. Now suppose there could be two, three categories of students. First category is, suppose you answer the question within that 1 minute. So I would request you to fast forward the video and skip right to the answer. You should not be wasting your time. Alright. Now the other students who are not able to answer the question in 1 minute, what you do, you don't skip to the answer. You pause the video and you write down your answer. Alright, it is very important to answer each and every question because there is no negative marking. Here you see, for every incorrect answer, no points, because there is no negative marking in IEO, so it is important that you attempt all the questions. Now for a question of which you are not sure about the answer, now even here and even in the exam, if you are not sure about the answer and you maybe think that B option might be correct or C option might be correct, so you should in that case play your luck and play your mind and make a guess and still give an answer, because it is a win-win situation. Either you will get the marks for that question or you will get a 0, right? But if you don't attempt that question at all, then you are anyway getting a 0 in that, right? So it is good to attempt those questions, and even if you don't know all the answers, try to understand and take a guess. Okay, so this is for every correct answer 10 points. This is just for your own little game where you can try to maintain a notepad. So here you write the name of the chapter and then the question, and then if it is correct you can give yourself 10 points. If it is not correct, you mark it here. So it is important to see these questions, the ones which you mark incorrect. It is important to go back to them later and then see where you did the mistake. Alright, this is just for your reference. For every correct answer you can give yourself 10 points. Alright, now let's start. we have this category of questions. What do we have to do in here? Fill in the blanks with the most suitable adverbs. So yeah, let's see. Choose the most suitable adverbs as per the blank. And let's see the options and the question here. Question says the essay is dash good. A, more good. B, very good. C, most good. Or D, much good. Now here, what is the correct answer? The essay is very good. Alright. More we use sometimes when we have to compare. Most again for superlative. Okay. And much is not used with the adjective good. Okay, here, are you feeling dash better today? A, very better. B, any better. A, very better. B, too better. C, any better. D, more better. Here the correct answer is C, any better. We are asking, क्या तुम्हें बिल्कुल भी like, any better today? Are you feeling any better today? Even the slightest better, okay? Here, very we don't use with better, too we don't use with better, and more we don't use with better because good जो है, good is itself क्या है? Comparative form of what? Comparative form of good. Good, better and best. So more तो बिल्कुल भी नहीं हो सकता. All right. Here, he works very dash these days. A, hard. B, hardly. C, scarcely. D, mostly. Here the correct answer is A, hard. He works very hard these days. Okay. Now, here we are talking about manner, adverb of manner. This is hard, right? She was dash too rude in her behavior. A. Quite too rude. B. Very too rude. C. Rather too rude. Or D. Fairly too rude. Here the correct answer is C. She was rather too rude in her behavior. Alright. Now here we have already used too. So यहाँ पे quite, very, fairly, all these won't fit, and the correct answer here is rather. She was rather too rude in her behavior. Okay, rather too rude we're using in the sense, you know, she did not have to be so rude. जो मेरे ख्याल से एक there's this certain sort of limit to which her rudeness would have been acceptable, but she was rather too rude. All right. We met after a very long time. We could dash recognize each other. A. Hardly. B. Hard. C. Much. D. Rather. Now here the correct answer is A. Hardly. We met after a very long time. We could hardly recognize each other. This is hardly here is the adverb answering the question of to what extent. हम बिल्कुल भी recognize नहीं कर पा रहे थे एक दूसरे को. So hardly. Other options, be hard. This doesn't fit here because we're talking about the extent की बात हो रही है. So यहाँ पे hard talks about manner, and much and rather also talk about extent or maybe frequent sometimes. All right. Alright, so here he had dash reached the metro station when the metro started. He had hard reached the metro station. B. He had very reached the metro station. C. Still reached. Or D. Hardly reached. Okay, so the correct answer again is hardly. He had hardly reached the metro station. Like to what extent? मतलब अभी तक पहुंच नहीं पाए थे completely and the metro started. Okay. Other words here, hard. This is used in manner. Okay, very again used for extent. He was dash relieved to know that he had been selected. He was hard relieved, he was much relieved, he was many relieved, he was any relieved. Here the correct answer is B. He was much relieved. Okay. Relief जो है countable तो नहीं है. Right, uncountable so we use much. He was much relieved. Okay. Here we're talking about the adverbs of adverbs which answer the question of to what extent. To what extent. Right? The situation is dash better this week. A. Hard better. B. Too better. C. Much better. D. More better. Here the answer is C. Much better. Again something better जो है it is the comparative form of what? Good ने भी discuss किया था. So here more भी use होगा. We don't use too. Not even hard. Okay, hard talks about manner. And C much is used because good जो है here this is not really countable, so we say too is say much better. Okay. Here the question says he drove the car dash to avoid missing the train. A. He drove the car quickly to avoid missing the train. B. He drove the car outside. B. He drove the car enough. Or D. He drove the car rarely. Here the correct answer is A. Quickly. This is pretty obvious because you see, if he's missing the train, he has to avoid missing the train, so he will drive the car quickly. So he drove the car quickly. Quickly is what? The adverb answering the question of how, so it is an adverb of what? Manner. Okay. The other words, be outside, this is an adverb of place. See enough, this is an adverb of extent. Matlab adverb answering the question of to what extent. D. Rarely, this is the adverb answering the question of what? Answering the question of how often, frequency. Alright, frequency. It took us dash 5 hours to reach the airport. A. Always 5 hours. B. Enough 5 hours. C. Nearly 5 hours. Or D. None of these. Here the correct answer is C. Nearly 5 hours. It took us nearly 5 hours. Here we are answering about the extent. So it took us nearly 5 hours, which means like almost 5 hours. To what extent? Okay. Now the other options, A. Always, this talks about frequency, answers the question of how often. And B. Enough, this is also the adverb of answering the question of to what extent. Okay. Alright, now these are the few HOTS questions which form a part of the achievers section. They carry final 3 marks in your final IEO paper. Let's read the question. It took me dash 3 hours to reach the airport. A. Rarely. B. Nearly. C. Enough. D. Very. The correct answer is Be nearly. Now you see this is similar to the last question we did. However, different question हम तब भी कर रहे हैं. But here it is similar to the last question we did. So it took me nearly 3 hours to reach the airport. Okay, nearly is the adverb answering the question of to what extent. The other words, A, rarely, answering the question of how often, adverb of frequency. C, enough, again the adverb answering the question of to what extent. D, very, again adverb answering the question of to what extent, right? Extent मतलब कौन सी लिमिट्स तक, किस हद तक, के टू व्हाट लिमिट और टू व्हाट एक्सटेंट समथिंग हैज हैपेंड, और किसी भी सिचुएशन को एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए. ओके, टू व्हाट लिमिट, टू व्हाट एक्सटेंट. Our future will be dash shaped by the youth. A, hardly. B, largely. C, merely. D, quickly. Now here the correct adverb is B, largely. Largely मतलब ज़्यादातर हमारा जो future है is going to be shaped by who? By the youth. So it is answering the question of to what extent. In A, hardly, this can be the adverb answering the question of to what extent again. C, merely, we can also say answering the question of to what extent. D, quickly, answering the question of how, which means the adverb of manner. Rest are the adverbs answering the question of to what extent. Okay. Right here, my seat was dashed to the window. A, last. B, first. C, later. D, next. Here, this is pretty easy, I think. The correct answer is D, next. My seat was next to the window. What is this answering? This is answering the question of where. So, it is the adverb of place. My seat was where? Seat was next to the window. Alright. So with this, we come to an end for our questions of adverbs. All right. So
that's all for our class on adverbs. I hope you have understood and had the basic idea about what adverbs really are. Make sure you use the correct one at the correct place. Otherwise, of course, you may lose marks. So that's all for this class. I hope you will revise and rectify any mistakes that you made. That's all. I will see you the next time. Thank you for watching.